right. Well, welcome back, everybody, to episode 7 of The Spark Show. Today we have Cameron Collier here in the studio again. We've got the California primaries coming up on June 2nd. That's this Monday. And we have someone in particular that we are favored towards. And I think we wanted to have a little chat about that and throw our endorsement out there for him. Cam, do you want to go ahead and start us off with what we have upcoming?
Yeah, I can't wait for Karen Bass to get back in office and we can continue on with fighting this homelessness crisis. I mean, she's been doing a bang-up job, making sure no one's getting dirty needles and that they have plenty of alcohol wipes, make sure their injection sites stay, uninfected. So we need to ramp that effort up a little bit more. Maybe try to get a few thousand more homeless people coming on in here so we can definitely, pump those numbers up, maybe get some more funding from Gavin Nutsack, and it'll be good to go.
So for all of our viewers out there that don't know Cameron very well, that is what we call raw and dry sarcasm. We are not big fans of Karen Bass, and we do not promote the funding of distributing drug needles, alcohol wipes, and all that stuff out on our streets of Los Angeles, which is why essentially we now have this shithole of a city that once used to be a glorious beacon in California.
I have no idea what you're talking about. This is culture, Spencer. The other day my wife and I were down on Skid Row. My wife is a hospice nurse, so drove her down there for, a little extra security. Couldn't find a parking spot anywhere because everyone's smashed out window cars were up along all the sidewalks, so I just decided to park in front of a driveway and just have my hazards on and wait, and I got to witness the cultural enrichment, and let me tell you, it was amazing to see a young gentleman about my age, roughly 35 years old, totally zombified. I watched him take off his brand new Nike sneakers that were obviously given and lit them on fire and walked away from it. And I just watched burning Nikes next to dried human feces and urine. And let me tell you, I couldn't have been more proud of my city and my city government. I thought it was amazing to witness. And then around this time, I see a young Hispanic female walking with her child in a stroller and just strolling on by. And I thought to myself, well, this is definitely not sketchy at all.
That scene just makes me think of a Hollywood film. Not one in particular, but one where you might see someone out, lost in the wilderness, and they're trying to set a smoke signal to call for help.
Maybe that is what it is. I mean, I just, talking about this, just kind of reliving that moment is, I mean, I encourage everyone. It is insanity. I believe right above Skid Row is it Chinatown? I'm not sure. But this facility wasn't 3 blocks away from City Hall. And you can literally, it's the most wild experience because you're driving by City Hall and it's clean-ish, and you just go a few more blocks on the same street, you keep driving, and then all of a sudden you're in a third world country, and you're like what is going on here? And I mean, there's plywood, there's tents, there's tarps, there's people everywhere walking across the streets, just jaywalking, clearly disheveled, dirty, haven't showered in who knows how long, strung out. You've got NGOs parked outside. You've got little mobile clinics that are there. These people are trying to do their best to help, individuals, which God bless them. But you're like, where's city leadership in all this? This is out of control. It's crazy, and you just go down a back alley take a wrong turn because, one-way streets and all. And, you just got some aggro individuals, men, you know, with like 15 bicycles that, they definitely bought. I'm sure they did. Their, personal ownership didn't steal them. And just, they see a car, coming up, and it's just like anger and aggression and immediately picking up the bike and just like in a threatening manner. And you're like, oh, great, I'm about to get a bike thrown at me. And it's like, I mean, how is this compassionate? It's wild. It's just like, well, you can't, they have the liberty to do that, right? So we have to support their individual liberty to live like this. And it's insane to me. And it's like, at what point have we had enough? And that's why I'm so encouraged to see someone like Spencer Pratt stand up and say enough is enough and say the hard truths that no one wants to say. And it's funny because it's definitely the most opportune time because the left has absolutely worn out the epithets about, you're a Nazi, you're a racist, you're a this or that, you don't care, you hate, and it's just like you're a bigot. And it's like, well, no one cares about those labels anymore. And we just want to get things back in order.
I think as someone or as, individuals who value our own personal safety and the safety of our families, and we put that on a high priority. I myself work with a lot of apartment complexes, commercial retail down in the Los Angeles area. And, one of the things that is just so disappointing, and it baffles me every time I drive by or visit a customer's property, is seeing these people that live in these apartment complexes in downtown Los Angeles, uh, how much they don't mind coming from a beautiful multi-million dollar apartment complex, on the 12th floor of their building, down the elevator, and then walk out to the sidewalk where their entryway is to their building to homeless tent encampments. It almost makes me feel like they don't want to take responsibility for their own voting habits, which have led to these problems. I look at this and I go, I clearly know why this is a problem because we are not prioritizing the safety of the citizens here in Los Angeles like we should be. We're not giving access to people that are contributing to, on a tax basis, at least at minimum, to keep these streets clean, to keep them safe. We do not prioritize law enforcement here. This has been a major problem with the defund the police movement. And I think the Spencer Pratt platform is extremely refreshing to all of us that are fed up with the programs that the Democrats have run in the downtown areas that have pretty much led to the demise of our once great city.
The one thing that's just bouncing around in my head, when you're, you know, criticizing the voting habits, it's, well, they're not voting. They're not taking the time. They don't care enough to take the time to vote. And it could just be the result of the demoralization campaign that has been run on us for, the better part of, well, I mean, who knows? Yuri Bezmenov is an interesting guy to look into. He, former KGB, who was sounding the alarm back in, I think, the 70s and the 80s, going on talk shows talking about how the Soviets are infiltrating your education system and they're enacting a campaign of demoralization. And here you are, everything that he described, you see coming to fruition. And the one thing that the Soviets weren't counting on, they thought they'd still be around to, you know, be the natural liberators, before their system collapsed. But now what we see is we just see how many people are just demoralized and how many people, they're not like, think about it, it's our 250th anniversary for the founding of our nation. And the sentiment of young people is, who cares? This nation isn't for me. The boomers stole everything, the billionaires, this, that, and the other. And it's like, you're actively being demoralized so that these people can take power. If you organize and if you actually look into these problems and look at it from a first principles point of view, how are you going to actually fix the issues? Not just be a bumper sticker Republican or a bumper sticker liberal, and just kind of operate based off of these, what do you call them? Just little sayings, like what you saw with the Black Lives Matter, no person is illegal, science is real. Um, this, you know what I mean? And it's like at some point you have to look at these problems, work through them, and then realize that if anyone is selling you simple solutions, it is not, 9 times out of 10, it's not the actual answer to the problem. It's more of a band-aid to get you to secure a vote. And enough is enough. Like it's truth is hard. It's a bitter pill to swallow. And, you know, at some point, you need to just let go of your preconceived notions, your biases, and ask yourself what is best for the city.
Yeah, you had mentioned, what can we do to not be a bumper sticker Republican, who sees problems and pretty much doesn't do anything other than maybe vote to try to change those issues. But I actually just saw a ad from Spencer Pratt, and it was, he had no intention of going into politics, coming from celebrity TV, to then having his home burned down in the Palisades and his parents' home burned down in the Palisades, from the Palisades fire. And he was fed up. He was fed up with the corruption. He's fed up with the lies from the local government, from our state government. And, God bless him. He has a platform, and he said, you know what? No more. I see a problem. I'm going to be the solution. And that's actually what we need in our government and, to get solutions these days. We need average Joes to be showing up and stepping up to go into public office, whether that's, state assembly, it could be a local board of, your water board. It could be anything where you can make an impact on these issues that are, arising in your community. But sitting back, letting the next, progressive liberal who's always been in politics take the position without any fresh thoughts or fresh perspective or any connect to what the taxpayer is actually concerned about, that's going to set us even further back. We're going to get further away from the solutions, and we're going to get more frustrated as taxpayers in this great state.
Well, let's let's call a spade a spade. These people aren't progressive. They're socialist communists. Their only interest is enforcing an ideology, a worldview that they have either inherited or been indoctrinated into, and they believe wholeheartedly is the solution. And they're willing to use any means necessary to reach that. I remember hearing that back when Trump was first elected, any means necessary, means necessary. And it's like, no, not any means necessary. That's a poison pill right there in itself. But getting to Spencer Pratt, one of the things that, you hear all the time is he has no experience. Well, the founding of our fathers wanted normal people in these positions of government. They didn't want career politicians. That was, career politicians is like the antithesis of representative government.
Let me inject real quick on your thought real quick. When you say no experience, a lot of people don't know this, and you may not even know it, but Spencer Pratt actually has a bachelor's degree in political science. So to say he has no experience, that may be accurate. He's maybe never held public office, but he at least has an educational background in, politics, at least the one degree that could provide some, perspective on what to expect if you're going to go into it.
Well, what does experience even mean? Let's actually let's unfold that a little bit. What does he not have experience with? Is it he has no experience with bureaucracy? He has no experience like what are you running an administration, I guess you could say. Well, isn't it, I'm no expert, but aren't these people just ran by political consultants? You know? at
Well,
the end of the day, like who's really running the back office, you know? Like, do you really think Karen Bass is, getting in the thick of things and, and shoveling paper and this, that, or is it her chief of staff that's telling her what to sign or and putting things, and it's a whole team that's assembled behind them, you're only as good as your weakest link, right? You always hear this saying, and it's just like, okay, so what team is he able to assemble? And you're telling me that extremely competent people, maybe in his industry of Hollywood, aren't excited to help and lend their expertise, to rectifying the situation? It's like, so I mean, it's so baseless and empty to say you have no experience. Like, okay, well, he's a 42-year-old man with 42 years of lived life experience, so he experienced something incredibly traumatic with his home burning down and his family's home burning down. So you don't think he learned some hard lessons there? You don't think that he learned how to empathize with people who have faced natural disasters? You think he has no empathy? So like, what empathy does a Karen Bass have? Like, what has she faced? What hardship has she faced? Maybe when she was younger, she faced hardship, but it looks like she entered into a political ecosystem and has been shuttled to the top, you know, and ultimately to vie for control to push forward a political perspective. So who knows? But one thing I wanted to really talk about with Spencer Pratt is I got the opportunity, to go to the Palisades to to drive my wife to see a patient whose house is literally, by the grace of God, wasn't burned down. And I just walked through the neighborhood and I just saw, I mean, talk about a paradise. I mean, I'm on top of the hill. I'm looking over in the distance. I can see the Santa Monica Harbor. The birds are chirping, and it's just like you're watching the overcast just pulled away from the shore, from the beach, and you're just like, this is the conditions that this man was living in, and I mean, just he literally was living in La La Land, you know, and him and his wife were able to create, enough money to support their lifestyle to live in this area, and good on them, and that you think he really wanted that to be disrupted? He says all the time, I liked being in my backyard feeding hummingbirds with my kids, like what life was this guy living? Just like think about it, like, I mean, what was he? I think he sold crystals, maybe. That's kind of like their main sources of income. And I think he said his wife, Heidi, was doing music. And I mean, does this sound like someone that was down in the dirt? You see those stickers on the guys of, working class guys, dirty hands, clean money.
yep.
Does that sound like dirty hands, clean money to you? Like, heck no. And, it's like, wow, I mean, what a fantasy, you know? I would love to live up there. I mean, it's insane. The views, I mean, the wealth. It's just like, and then to have that utterly stripped away from you due to just negligence, criminal negligence, and it's like I saw the reservoir that's empty again, it's like, oh, it's for drinking water. And it's just like, well, originally it was intended for wildfire mitigation because guess what? LA's always dealt with wildfires, even back, in, well, actually, speaking of which, I've heard of anthropologists talking about how the Native Americans would do controlled burns because they had to deal with wildfire and stuff like that. So it's like this is a common natural disaster that we know is coming. We know the Santa Anas are coming every year. Nothing's changing. So it's just like getting, sorry, I went off on a tangent there, but getting back to Spencer with no, no experience. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. He's doing this for clout, doing this for clout. Okay, maybe, maybe he's got to rebuild his business, right? So, best way to do it. But he's actually bringing tough solutions to these problems. And it's just like, no one wants to say that, we need to actually stop giving these people needles. We need to stop doing this. We need to stop encouraging this behavior because humans are led by encouragement. So take away the incentive and you'll no longer have the issue.
Yeah, I'm going back to your point of no experience Pratt. It's not a viable one to me. I can just point to Trump in 2020. You know, uh, First time president, right? Or
2016.
2016, I'm sorry. So Trump back in 2016, a lot of people screamed and shouted. They say Trump's got no experience. He's just some big wealthy businessman, billionaire, doesn't really care. He's just going to do this for his own agenda. Well, I like to point that I think it's a fresh, good start to have somebody with no experience, somebody that just has solutions to the problems. Because we argued too that Trump was going to walk into a presidency and have a cabinet filled of very experienced advisors. And it turns out a lot of those advisors, stabbed his back. A lot of those advisors were corrupt in their own right. And they fought his agenda that he came in with, his fresh perspective, the solutions that he had. They wanted to fight back on those and actually didn't serve to help him promote his agenda. And so even if Spencer Pratt walks into this, mayor position with these great ideas, I'm not so sure that the people that are at these institutions that can help enact these, major reform, are going to be there to help him. I don't know, if all the institutions that are supposed to be helping Spencer Pratt clean up our streets or make them safer are going to actually want to promote those agendas. But I have to have faith that at least in the safety perspective, that our law enforcement will be thankful to have somebody whose top priority is to make the streets safe again.
Well, I think so much of it comes down to like the NGOs that support these candidates, and the whole money laundering, that we see. And it's just like, what lessons did we learn from Doge? People get all up in arms and are angry at Trump because he shut Doge down and all of this good stuff. But well, first of all, you don't understand the way power works, and the president doesn't have ultimate supreme authority. He's not the emperor, he is the president, and he basically has war powers, and that's it. So, yeah, he's got the executive orders, but we have the checks and balances of the courts. And when you see all the executive orders he put into place, immediately you're seeing the flood of lawsuits, and that's being funded by, left wing billionaires and NGOs and all that good stuff. But what we learned is that just because you're a Republican doesn't mean that you're not benefiting from the gravy train. And I believe it was Elon Musk who said that, the Republicans were up in arms because even though the Democrats were receiving the lion's share of the fraudulent money, Republicans were still getting some of that money, even if it was 10%, 15, say 20%. And it's like these people, no one wants their gravy train interrupted, even if that's, a tiny little slice of the pie. So at the end of the day, it's getting back to this whole, oh, you don't have experience. Yeah. Oh, he has no experience in NGO fraud and all these fraudulent schemes where they're sucking money like succubuses, leeches off of the system. No, enough is enough. It's like you, the listener, you need to take up the mantle and to take your lived experience and to put your perspective into government. That is the whole purpose of our Republican system. It's about common people working a job, not experienced politicians who have been formed and they don't adhere to the will of the people. They adhere to the will of the political establishment. And that's like the whole call of what's happening right now with MAGA. Like you see all these people that are angry with Trump that he's not doing enough. And here he is, the first president ever in history to unseat incumbent senators. Well, why? Because they are this corrupt establishment that are there to protect the institution of the Senate. Not for, what are they refusing to do? They're refusing to pass the Save America Act. And, enough is enough. We need to get these. You should not make a career out of being a senator. There should be term limits. Enough is enough. You should be only allowed to serve 2 terms and then you're moving on. Now, you're still going to deal with problems of corruption and all of that, but at least you're going to have some churn. When you've had senators and Congress people for over 40 years, I mean, come on, man. You absolutely are going to be affected by this stench that is the swamp, which I don't know if you guys know this, but DC actually is a swamp. Did you know that?
Don't know that it is actually a swamp.
It was actually a swamp that they turned into Washington, D.C. So, I mean, gotta love how, God has a sense of humor.
Yeah, well, Trump definitely called it out as it was. So on top
And
of
he is draining the swamp because look at the Washington Monument, look at Meridian Hill, look at, I don't know what they call it. Did they call that the Grand Central Station? And I was just watching a video with Asmongold kind of going over, doing like little Google Earth, looking at past trends of like, what did this look like back in Obama's time? What does it look like now? And, you know, there's actually an effort to clean up because it turns out when you clean up an area, people take pride in it and they enjoy it. I saw this, I think it's called Malcolm X Park. Let's call it by, its colloquial name. And so you check this out. You're looking at the old Google's Earth of this pond or fountain, cascading fountain, and I mean it's just dirty water. You can see the algae growing at the bottom of it. This is back in 2011, 2012. The height of Obama, and now you got crystal clear waters, and you just got all these people putting their feet in the pond, and they're just enjoying it. And do you think those people voted for Trump? Or do they think they voted for Kamala? You know? And it's like, maybe take a chance and see if things change. Because guess what? The beautiful thing is in 4 years, the guy can be gone.
That's right. So just trying to promote further what could help Spencer Pratt accomplish his goals. So let this be a formal announcement that the Spark Show, Cameron Collier and Spencer Parks do endorse Spencer Pratt for mayor of Los Angeles. Not that we live in the city of Los Angeles, so we cannot personally be voting for him, but we absolutely encourage anybody who does live in the city of Los Angeles to cast your vote for Spencer Pratt. He is definitely the candidate that's going to bring us the safest, cleanest city, the best version of Los Angeles that we've seen in probably 3 decades. And then how I think that we can further promote Spencer Pratt's agenda is by getting a Republican governor into the governor's house, the governor's mansion of California. And I had just recently cast my ballot for Steve Hilton, and that was after I had made a phone call to Cameron, and I said, hey, I'm still getting a lot of different feedback on if we should be going for Bianco or Hilton. And Cameron made it quite simple for me. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I love the things that Chad Bianco says. It's funny, my feed is always being inundated, but at the end of the day, I have to go with the political instincts of Donald Trump. And I know people, they recoil at the prospect of this man, but you don't climb to the heights that he has climbed to without some political intuition. And he has good political intuition. And then you see the endorsements of his candidates that, in all these primaries, and he's basically at 100%. And so it's not that I don't like Chad Bianco, but I think if we want the possibility of Republicans to come into office, you have to get behind one candidate. You can't split the vote. Look at what, there's a reason why Trump reached out to Kennedy, because Kennedy was pulling numbers away from him. And so at some point, we have to get behind just one guy or we risk being shut out, and it's here we go again, another 4 years. And then once there's the income, it's really hard to get rid of them. And it's like, okay, so are we going to do with another 8 years of the same old, same old. People that are beholden to ideologies and not solutions. It's like at the very least, we need churn. You need to unclog the system. We live in a supermajority Democrat state, and things have only decayed from where they once were. And why is it? Because there's no accountability, because there's no churn. There's no reason why these people have to even worry about accountability. All they have to do is call a candidate, a Donald Trump MAGA Republican, and vote for me, and that's enough. And it's like, guys, how does that put bread on your table? How does that reduce, the pressures, from taxation and, all these crazy things? I mean, look at our gas, you know? It's like, I mean, I'm so sick and tired of the bloviating politicians running on, you know, culture war nonsense. It's just like they want to get you emotional, they want to get you all charged up so that you just fall in line. And it's like, no, dude, enough is enough. Like you see this even with, with the Rhino Republicans. They love to get on board with the culture war nonsense, the transing of your kids and all that sort of stuff. And then you vote for them. And then they go to Washington, D.C., and here they are in all the parties, the Washington Post, all that nonsense. And, they're just feeding the D.C. establishment, because that is who they are beholden to. And it's like enough is enough. If someone is trying to make you angry, you need to immediately be suspect of them because they're trying to control you. They're triggering you.
Yeah, look, Chad Bianco was the obvious candidate for me right out of the gate when he first announced his run for governor. I really think he's the staunch Republican candidate. Very America first. Some very hardcore solutions such as fixing up the registration issues at the DMV and making it like a flat rate uh, DMV fee for registration for the year, just like they have in other states. He's mentioned. However, some of my favorite people, some of my favorite humble citizens are immigrant citizens, right?
Mm-hmm.
They almost have the best understanding of what it means to be an American these days. If you've not become deluded with this Democrat agenda that's poisoned the minds of half of our nation.
Demoralization.
So, I've told you this lately, to be a conservative means to conserve some of the great ideas that our nation has, that it came from its roots, and that conservatives inherently wake up happier most of the time because we do wake up with this idea or this morale that makes us feel like there is things that are still great about this country. Just like MAGA says, make America great again. We're not acknowledging that we've always been great. There have been times in our history that have been terrible, and yet we've been able to overcome, reform, and then become better. And yet we end up in this same cycle where we're, having struggles, but then we need to reform and then keep pushing forward, but still hang on to the things that make us great. And our Constitution is going to be the greatest political document ever written in the history of our nation and maybe the world. But that's the thing that we have to latch on to, and we have to cling to that in order to stay focused. We cannot, uh, put a spin on words. We can't translate the Constitution into some liberal, progressive, socialist, communist document that it will never be. You can
Mm-hmm.
say that you want all these things, but you're in the wrong place if you think that that's ever going to work here. If you think that's what's going to work here because some of your favorite Democratic leaders have told you this is going to be the way, then you're going to always end up happy because you're always going to be searching for that utopia just around the corner, just around the next promise of that campaign. That campaign promise, like Joe Biden said, we're going to, release your student debt that's owed, just isn't going to happen because that's not what responsible borrowing is about. Like those are just any person with common sense, which what our Constitution is rooted in, very basic common sense. And, you can't change those things.
Actually, it's very uncommon sense because when you actually look at the words, all men are created equal. No, we're not. I'm taller than you. you know, you could have more creativity than me, like we all have different attributes. So we are not, we are not equal. But what is it that we are equal under? Well, we're equal under God, our creator, right? So there is no child. Like, so think about your own children. What child do you love more? No, you love your children equally, or you should love your children equally. And because God is that perfect personification of love, he loves us all equally. So that is why. And that is uncommon when you look at human history. When you compare, like, what are you comparing, American history to, like current 2026 morality? Like, of course, but then, zoom out a little bit further and then keep zooming and then keep zooming and then look at the biblical record of human behavior. And it's a constant quagmire of self interest, barbarity. And God is constantly calling people back and repenting, because what does repent mean? Repent means to change your behavior back in line according to his love. Like, what's God's law? Love, right? Love, love, love. And so that has been what has led the progressive change of our morality over the centuries, is that unifying, orderly love. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why you can't leave people to their own devices, because humans are, they inherently make mistakes. I don't want to call them corrupt, but the heart is corruptible when you're led by the heart, when you're led by self love. It's like, no, you need to be selfless, not selfish. And when you're always orientated towards satisfying the desires of the heart, you inevitably get led astray because you see the shiny object and you just go for the shiny object. So, you know, what you when you were saying, I don't even like the idea of conservative. I just want to be a conservationist. You know what I mean? Um, it's like I want to, I look around. It's like this, we are in the best moment of human history. I mean, look look around. Look at what we're doing. You know what I mean? Like, you weren't doing this not even 20 years ago. You know what I mean? It's like, guys, let's get some perspective. Yes, there are things that need to change. Yes, there are things that need to improve, but that is why you need churn. You just need churn, constant churning, constant movement of getting these people, getting those who have rooted themselves in the system, unrooting them. Think about a garden when you're growing vegetables and the weeds come in. It's not that the weeds are um, are terrible, they're bad. They're also God's creation, deserving of love, but it affects your harvest. So you need, because why? Because they're competing for the same nutrients that your plants need to grow. So what do you got to do? You got to cultivate them and remove them and then put things in. And guess what? Sometimes you sow seed and some grow while others don't. And that's why, what do? You're constantly cultivating. And so that's the whole point of our system. So getting back to this, you have no experience. Good. We don't want experienced politicians. We don't want people that are experienced in knowing how to game the system. We want those that are um, idealistically ignorant to, to the corruption of the bureaucracy that runs everything. And yeah, there are people that it can be used and they can be naive, but that's the beauty of our system, because you can just get them out of there in 4 years. Or, think about our representatives. It's 2 years, right? Every 2 years they're out.
Yeah.
I mean, how genius is that? It's like, just think about the genius of that system, where it's just like, oh, well, that guy was a terrible choice. Get him out of there. But instead, it's like, well, if he's protected by a political party, oh man, I'd like to talk about that, because, the whole Thomas Massey thing, and, and oh man, they spent $35 million, Israel and this, that, and the other, and money buys politics. And, Complete silence about the whole John Cornyn, Ken Paxton race where the Rhino Republicans, that race was $100 million for a primary. We're like, so anyways.
Well, I think getting back to Steve Hilton, I think why he's going to be the next great choice for governor in California is because he's going to reinforce all those great ideas. The conservatives here in California, we're sick and tired of hearing the same old Democrat, talking points. We don't want a progressive, weird, utopian society where all of these ideas that they've flushed out to their base are going to come to fruition. We want to restore the nuclear family, the greatness of the nuclear family. We want men to be providers. We want women to be able to stay home with their children, raise a family. And none of these things are all possible if, we don't make things more affordable here for our families, for our, to raise up families here in the state. If we keep down this path of, the Democrat, socialist, communist, lack of, personal and family safety, we're going to end up in a really bad place. And so that's why I think that putting the right guys in place in our local state government is going to be the best next big change for us. That's why I think Spencer Pratt for mayor and then Steve Hilton for governor are going to be the next best choices to get us out of this situation.
No, absolutely. And then you see Steve Hilton and his background. It's something that really touches my heart because, my grandparents, they immigrated after World War II to from England. My grandfather was a tailor, and he had to get sponsored to actually come over here. And so he came over on the boat, went through Ellis Island, and then got a job, working in a warehouse, sewing clothes, and then he eventually, I think he was here for a couple of years without my grandma and my uncle, and he had to earn enough to then be able to prove to the government that he could support his family. And that's what he did, and that's what was asked of him. So like it's one of these things where it's just like, people might see me and judge a book by a cover, oh, you're just a white American, but no, I'm a second generation American. My dad's a first generation American. And it's like my wife, she's an immigrant. She's immigrated here from a country called Turkmenistan, that's over by Iran and Afghanistan, around the Caspian Sea. And she had to, poop in an outhouse, and they had no running water. So it's like she gets it, I get it. So when I see a Steve Hilton, I can really empathize with his story, and then you see how successful he was, and the businesses he created, and it's just like that's what you need. You need that entrepreneurship, that that willingness to look at an issue and to look for the solution, not the easy answer, not the what's going to get me reelected. Because at the end of the day, that's what this current establishment is thinking about is their next election, and it's just like, well, how do they turn into millionaires? It's like, what? I don't still, what's the mechanism behind that? And that's what they're working for, obviously. And then to our detriment.
Yeah, before you get too far away from the immigration talking point, I really want to point out that one of the things I think that we're really struggling with as a nation right now is the topic of immigration. And I think that speaking about our families who both have immigrants, that have come here and assimilated into our, American society, our immigration laws, the true test of our immigration laws is somebody that's immigrating here going to be of value or add value to our nation, or are they going to be a burden? And that test has been stripped away as of late. But I also think it goes to show that the people that immigrate here illegally, crossing the border without going through the proper channels or being vetted, or wait in line like the people who are doing it legally, it basically goes to show that, those are the people that actually want to assimilate into American culture. They want to embrace our culture. They want to embrace our laws. They want to better our society. They want to contribute. But when people come here and are granted amnesty without being properly vetted, then we risk allowing people to be here who essentially want to bring either their third world or second world cultures here to the United States. They don't embrace our laws. And so we end up with criminals running the streets. And, we have people that just overall don't respect our nation. And so what are we going to end up with? We're not going to end up with a melting pot of beautiful culture. We're going to end up with a melting pot of, criminal third world aliens that are, spread out amongst our great cities with American tax-paying citizens who expect more from their government, especially from our immigration laws.
Well, I mean, one of the perfect examples is street vendors. Go to South Alvarado Street in Los Angeles and try to walk on the sidewalk, and you can't because it's just taken over by, street vendors. And I get it; they're trying to survive the best way they can. But think about the businesses that they're taking sidewalk space for, that are paying taxes, that are paying for the infrastructure, that are probably paying for their welfare. Not probably, they are paying for their welfare that they're receiving. And it's just a slap in the face to those who actually work, and provide and put money into the system. And it's just like it's unfair. It absolutely is. And it's like enough is enough.
Yeah, and putting a Republican candidate as mayor in Los Angeles, putting a Republican governor into the governor's mansion of California, why this strategically is going to be so great for Republicans speaking is because there's a potential we could end some sanctuary state laws, sanctuary city laws. This
Yes.
is not allowing our our local state government law enforcement agencies to cooperate with the federal government, especially when they're trying to enforce immigration law.
I just watched an interview with NBC, kind of like, a very critical of Spencer Pratt, and the guy's trying to get him to admit that Spencer Pratt is a Donald Trump Republican. You can constantly bringing up Donald Trump, and Spencer's trying to reorient it. This is a local race, and this has nothing to do with national politics. But one of the things he said, and one of the angles that the reporter used is well, how are you going to work with the federal government if you can't even acknowledge Donald Trump? And you're like, well, what is the current government doing right now? They're not doing it. They're not even working with it. So it's just like it's mind numbing, where it's just like how adversarial the national news media is with, perceived Republican candidates. And it's just like the best part about it, honestly, is nothing hardens steel more than the fire. And you see this where, and by any scrutiny, these, protected Democrats just crumble. Well, why is that? Because they never face scrutiny, where Republicans are always in these adversarial situations having to defend their positions. And it's just like they're actually doing Democrats a disservice. And which is one of the reasons why Gavin Newsom jumped on the opportunity to talk with Charlie Kirk, right? Because he's trying to strengthen his chops for his eventual presidential run, because he's a political creature, and he knows.
I'd also just quickly, since you mentioned Charlie, I want to just mention it to people, and I hope people don't take it the wrong way, but one of the most recent videos you could find in Charlie's bank of videos was his endorsement for Steve Hilton when he even made his just very first announcement to run for governor. Charlie was a big advocate and friend of Steve's and said that if there's going to be somebody to be able to turn around this great state, it would be Steve Hilton. So if you love Charlie as much as I did, then you would definitely take that into account when you're casting your ballot on Monday or prior to Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty wild. I was kind of hoping that Chad would, take the hint and kind of drop out and put his support behind Hilton. But, egos are egos at the end of the day. Yes, he's got a lot of great ideas. But, one of the things, you have to look at the electability of a candidate. And when you're just looking at the surface level, and so much of politics is the surface level, I'm sorry, Hilton is perceivably more electable on just image alone than thick, handlebar mustache, hard ass Chad Bianco. That touches my heart. I know lots of men like that, I look up to, but You know, you got to really think about it.
I think we all think, California could use a cowboy makeover, but those that
California
are
is cowboy. Go
okay.
go up south, or the central, California. You know what I mean?
Yep. This,
Cowboy culture is, that's cowboy culture is Mexican culture too. You know what I mean?
yep.
And so it's just like this, we've been taken over by the population centers, which is why I am an advocate of the imperfect electoral college system. I wish we had that on the state level because it would make it so much more competitive for the good ideas to rise to the top. Because it's just, oh, well, you just have population density. And why do they have such an advantage? Well, because they ballot harvest and you don't need ID, you don't need all these things. People can collect the ballots, all that stuff. They they game the system to their advantage to where they can just go around, with all their political messaging and all their fear mongering of this scary MAGA Republican, oh, the evil Donald Trump Nazi orange Cheeto man, who is simultaneously a mad genius, crazy idiot, stupidest person on earth. It's like, enough is enough, guys. Can we just let the churn happen?
That's right. I think that's going to be a good point to end off on today, Cam. So as we had discussed, once more to touch on it in case you stepped into the show late, Cameron and I are both endorsing Spencer Pratt for mayor and Steve Hilton for governor of California. So if you haven't, don't forget to cast your vote for both of them if you live in the city of Los Angeles for Spencer Pratt, and then just for the statewide primary to get Steve Hilton on the ballot on Monday, June 2nd. That's coming up. And thanks everyone for sticking around with us on this episode of the Spark Show. We'll see you next week.
One last thing, look into Reform California. It's a great resource.
Okay. Is that going to be a website, Kim?
Yeah, just Google it. Reform California. I think the guy's name is Carl DeMaio, if I'm getting that correct. I follow his YouTube channel, and he keeps me updated. He's a state assemblyman Republican, and he's in it and calling out the Democrats all that he can, but super majority, so there's only so much he can do. But he's a good educator, and he's definitely outside the Republican California GOP establishment.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Well, that's it for this week, and we'll see you all next week here on the Spark Show. Have a great weekend.
God bless.